good afternoon, evening, everybody. I am Manuel Castañeda, Director of Community Health at New Brunswick Tomorrow. We are proud to present our first part of Vaccine Week, where we will be sharing different aspects about vaccines, in particular the COVID-19 vaccine, throughout the week. Today, we are happy to be in the company of two great people. First off is Maria Merced, Director of Community Health at the Health Promotions Department. Is it Department, Mariam? I don't want to get it wrong. It is, okay. Program, there you go. At Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital. And our presenter today is Andrew Thomas, who is the Director of Care Transitions at Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital. And we've asked Andrew today to help us learn a little bit more about just vaccines in general. Today, we're just going to cover vaccines and the COVID vaccines so that you get a better understanding of vaccines. Tomorrow's segment, just a little bit of a preview, will be on how vaccines get approved. But today specifically is about just vaccines and what vaccines are. So Andrew, can I start by asking you simply, well, first of all, thank you for coming today. We don't have enough time to say thank you and welcome, right? Everything's quick. So let me stop and say thank you. Just ask you one basic question and we can go from there, right? Is what is a vaccine? I think a lot of people, are still not understanding what a vaccine is and how it works to help, stopping from people getting, let's say, a disease or a viral infection.
So vaccines in general are just products that we prepare, make, that are that we can get into the human body or even other animals to prepare the body to fight diseases and to actually develop our immunity. So I've said one word there, immunity. So really explaining vaccine, I should actually go back and explain what immunity is. And to explain immunity, you should really go back and see how does the body actually develop its immunity so you can understand vaccines better. When you have any foreign body that gets into the body that can cause a disease, we call those antigens. Remember that. When an antigen gets into the body itself has this natural capacity to fight that antigen. So usually in the beginning, the antigen that gets into the body is foreign. So the body is not used to seeing that. So what the body actually does is it develops its own system that can fight that particular antigen when it comes back. That system that it develops is called an antibody. So most of the time we hear antigen and antibody. So antigen, just think of the germ that comes into the body, and an antibody is it's the Marines, the fighting capacity that we develop to fight the antigens. So the first time they come in, we don't know what they are. When they come back the next time, our immune system has developed this immunity to that foreign antigen. So what we develop now is a system that we can actually develop that kind of antibody we can inject into the person so the person doesn't wait to get the disease itself. That is a vaccine. So that's how we develop a vaccine. And that's really what is a vaccine.
Great, thank you for that. And one of the questions that we keep hearing from the community is that they keep hearing that there's different types of vaccines, right? Right now, what everybody's talking about is the mRNA vaccine, but I know that there's different types. Can you speak to the mRNA vaccine and the other types of vaccines that are available at this point?
Yes. And that's interesting. So remember I said, what we really need to see about vaccines is to inject something into the body that the body can develop its own antibodies, right? So it can develop its own immunity. So long time ago, long time ago, we realized that we can take the antigen itself, deactivate it, like actually kill a version of it and inject that. And the body will realize that that is a foreign object. It's an antigen and it can develop immunity to that. So a long time ago, we were doing really two kinds of vaccines. One was live attenuated vaccines, which was take the live antigen or the live bacterial virus itself and actually try as much as possible to weaken it, So if you inject that particular version of the virus or the antigen or the bacteria into your body, it doesn't make you sick, but the body itself can develop immunity to it. So one kind of vaccine was live attenuated vaccine, which is just a weak version of the live vaccine itself. And then the other one was inactivated. Inactivated was that you kill it by heat or by chemicals, and then the product itself, the body can still sense as a foreign product, and then the body can develop immunity to that. So that was another kind of vaccine. Those actually usually take a long time to develop. If you think about it, right? I take a virus, I have to kill it, I have to measure what's the right quantity that the body will react to. So for a long time, those are the kind of vaccines we had. Then as time went on, we realized that we can actually just use subunit, a part of the bug itself, a part of the antigen itself, a part of the virus, and the body can still sense that that is also a foreign object and develop antibodies or immunity to that. But then as technology develops, especially with the development of Genome Project, we can actually look at the genes of the viruses, of the antigen, and actually just develop vaccines with that and inject that into the human body. And then the human body will develop proteins that looks like those particular antigens. And then those proteins will also trigger the immune system. So that technology is what's called mRNA. RNA is just, another part of the human genetics. So you develop that, you take part of that RNA, and then you inject it. So it allows the body to create the proteins that look like, especially something like COVID that's new now, it looks like the COVID virus itself. But because it's not a virus, it's just a protein, you cannot get sick from it. So it makes it so much better. And because it's a new technology, the time to get to the vaccine is quite short because you just do the genetic profiling, you make it from the genetic profile and inject into the human body. The trials is usually the same, but that's how we got into mRNA. Newer vaccines too are on the pipeline. There is DNA vaccines coming up, and you have the viral vector vaccines. Okay, the viral vector vaccines is we look at viruses or other products that we can actually take the same genetic code like the mRNA and inject it into those viruses, and those viruses can be a vector, get into the system, and then give the person, and the person develops immunity. One thing we have to understand is what we give is to just help the human body develop immunity. So if you think about that, it has to develop its own immunity. So hence, usually when you even look at all the different types of vaccines I've talked about, and there are several other kinds, but these main ones that I've spoken about, if you think about it, the inactivated, which is a killed version of the vaccine, is the immunity is not as strong, right? Because it's a killed version of it. So usually you need booster shots. And usually you can see that for hepatitis, for flu, for polio. And then the weakened vaccine, that gives a strong, long-lasting immunity. And the mRNA now, because it's actually the protein of the antigen itself, it also gives very strong immunity. The only concern we have currently is, especially for COVID, the one concern we have is we don't know how long the immunity lasts because it's so new. So we're going through that. But that's, in a nutshell, it's the different types of vaccine.
That's great. I think you made it. I understand it a bit better. So thank you very much. I know it's difficult to kind of talk about this stuff. One thing that you mentioned that I know and we hear a lot in the community, right, is a concern. You talk about genetics, you talk about RNA and DNA, and people are concerned about the mRNA vaccines, right? And the reason that they say that they're concerned is because they hear RNA, they hear DNA, and now there's people saying that, oh, you don't want this because it'll change your DNA genetic makeup and mess up your body. Can you address that? Is that true?
Yes. As far as we know, it's not true. And the reason being, the genetic code itself for all the genes is embedded in the nucleus of the cell. The nucleus is just the center where the life is, where everything is. The mRNA vaccine do not get into the nucleus. We know that for a fact. It does not get in there. So the tendency for it to affect the genetic code is slim to none, just because it does not get into the nucleus itself. And also, yes, it's a genetic code that sends it and allows the body itself to make the protein. And for COVID, it actually makes the spikes that we see that gives the virus is namely corona. It looks like, a crown. So that spikes, that's what the mRNA vaccine allows the cells to build. But once they build that, the cells themselves kills the genetic codes that's in there itself. So the chance of it affecting the genetic code is none, as far as we can see, or how it actually, how it actually works.
Great, thank you for answering that. And so I think now that we have a good idea, based on what you said of what a vaccine does, the different types of vaccines, I'm wondering if we can get a little more specific with respects to COVID itself, right? And can you explain the different vaccines that are available for people with respects to COVID? And which are the vaccines? I know that people don't have heard about the 3 different types, with the J, and I'll let you get more into this, but the J&J vaccine being the new kid on the block, if you will. But people are also, confused about the dosages, that some people are hearing you got to take 1 or 2 shots. I know that's different depending on the vaccine that you take. Some people have heard differences in terms of side effects, that certain vaccines give you side effects. And then I think one of the major things that we can talk about, kind of setting the picture for you, is effectiveness or efficacy, right? People are hearing different effectiveness, rates of efficacy, if you will, and how important is that, overall, in terms of effectiveness of all the vaccines. But if I can just take you a step back, and maybe if you can help at least start us off by explaining each of the vaccines that are available today and their different aspects.
Okay, so I'll start with the different vaccines. For the United States, we've had 3 vaccines that are approved for what we call EUA, emergency use authorizations. So FDA usually, fast track, because of the pandemic, we're able to fast track it. So again, to address one question, I don't know if you asked that earlier, people are concerned that, this vaccine, they made it quite, the time that they made it was really fast, was really short. So how can it be really good? Yes, we used to make vaccine for years. But that also, we used to take years to, from development to actually getting the vaccine out to people. But that also involved not just the development, the different kind of technology, but also involved the authorization and the approval of FDA. There was no emergency use authorization. So emergency use authorization itself can cut it down by almost a year or 2 years, right? So if you have something, you have a pandemic, you have something. So let people just know that. Just emergency use authorization itself by itself will cut down the time to get a vaccine as a product. In the United States, there has been approval of 3 major vaccines, the Pfizer, and it's not just Pfizer, it's Pfizer, BioNTech. It's the first one that came out. And then you have the Moderna, and then you have the J&J. They're all very efficacious. They're all really good. They're all really fine to take. And whichever one is available is the one that you should take. Let's start with that. Now, FDA described fully vaccinated as somebody who's had their last shot that's required, the last vaccine shot, for at least 14 days after their last vaccine shot. So if you had your last vaccine shot, 14 days exactly after, you're considered fully vaccinated. That means you have the full 95%, 94%, whatever benefits they say the vaccine has, you will have that. So remember that, okay? So now, because we talk about, especially J&J as the new kid on the block, it's efficacious is the same thing. It has very, very minute advantages, which we still do not advise people to wait for. But if you have a choice between J&J and Pfizer, which is usually very limited for you to have a choice, these are the differences that you can see. The J&J is approved for 1 shot. Okay, the Pfizer and the Moderna is 2 shots. Remember, you're fully vaccinated 14 days after your last shot. So J&J, you get the shot, 14 days later, you consider fully vaccinated. Pfizer and Moderna, you get a first shot. It takes for Pfizer, it takes about 21 to 28 days. For Moderna, it takes about 28 days. And it is 14 days after that before you're fully vaccinated. So there is a difference in that timeline. So if you have a choice of getting Pfizer right now, and you have a choice of getting J&J, I would say take the J&J because of that advantage. But if you have to wait even 3, 4, 5 days, 1 week, the advantage significantly diminishes. There is no advantage in that. Also remember the J&J and the Moderna, when you get a first shot, you still have the benefit of about 45 to 50%. It's not that it's zero, it's still 45 to 50%, right? So there is still benefit even from the first shot. So that's what people have to remember. The Moderna and the Pfizer BioNTech, they are 2 shots. And also, if you think about it just globally, I know we talk about the United States, the refrigeration property for Pfizer and Moderna is very stringent. So it doesn't travel too well. In the United States, it's really great. We have UPS, we have United States Postal Service. But when you take it to third world countries, it becomes a challenge. The J&J becomes better. So if you see third world countries actually requesting more J&J, that's the reason why. Because it lasts for 3 months, it's just regular refrigeration instead of sub-zero temperatures for the Pfizer and the Moderna. The efficacy is the same, and you actually encourage a lot of people because you need to get to a herd immunity, right? You have to get a lot of people immunized to stop the transmission. So you cannot get if we can get 100% people immunized, that's really great. The concern about that too is what we're still learning from the vaccines, right? Comparing, and this is for all the vaccines. We don't know a few things. Number one, we don't know how well it can prevent transmission of the disease. I know it protects me. When I get it, it develops my immunity, right? But if I have the virus in me, can I still transmit it? We don't know that. So hence the reason why they're still telling us, even if you get a vaccine, wear a mask. That's the one thing, because I don't want to infect another person who doesn't have, the vaccine yet. So that will spread to other people. They will not create herd immunity. That's the one thing. The other thing is we don't know how long the vaccine can protect somebody. We don't have that information yet. It's new, we don't have the information. So we don't know if it's a lifetime thing. We don't know if it's 6-month thing. So we don't know if it's 7-month thing. So now why is that important? And why you can see that we are pushing so hard to get as much people vaccinated as possible. Because say for instance, we don't know, but say it lasts 6 months. Your immunity or the vaccine is only good for 6 months. And I have only vaccinated 50% of the people in 6 months. What happens 6 months later? That means I'm no longer protected, so I have a high risk again of getting it. So you really need a short time to vaccinate as much people as possible to get the herd immunity. Because otherwise, we don't know how long the vaccine will last. It might last 1 year. So if we don't have 80% of the population in 1 year, that increases the cycle again, because all the people who have been vaccinated become unprotected again, and they just continue. That makes sense, I hope.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. So so you've mentioned, the effectiveness, that even though there's different percentages, that they're all safe, right? And that the message, if I hear it correctly from you, is that, we don't necessarily have the ability to choose, and you shouldn't really care about that ability, right? That you should really, you agree that you should get whatever vaccine is available to you, that each of the 3 is as effective as the others.
Correct. They're all as effective. The only difference is one of them is 1 shot, the other 2 are 2 shots. That's really the only difference, yes. But right now, because of the availability of vaccines, we don't even have much choice to pick which one we really have to, right? So whichever is available, you just take. The other thing to note is the recommendation from the CDC and the vaccine companies is If you take one, the first shot of one, you should take the same second shot of the same one. Okay, we don't have any studies to prove efficacy or any other benefit if you take, Pfizer once or Pfizer BioNTech, and then you take Moderna as your second shot. We don't have that, so you should take the same one. But also, to add to that, if you take one and then they accidentally give you the other one, you should not repeat and take the other dose.
Got it. So you should make it a point to stick with either if you get Pfizer, stick with Pfizer. If you get Moderna, stick with Moderna.
Yes.
But if for some reason there's a mix-up, that's still okay.
Yes, that's okay. You don't have to. We don't have any benefits, but they believe the risk of you getting the 3 vaccines is very dangerous. It's not been studied, but very dangerous.
So I think one of the other differences that you mentioned is that if I remember right, both the Moderna and the Pfizer, they're mRNA vaccines, right? Like you explained.
Correct.
The J&J is different though, correct?
Yes, it's that's why even the way you store them is different. The J&J is the one that we use vectors, right? Remember I explained about using vectors, using an other virus or some other source of thing that you can inject. It's the same kind of mRNA, it's still genetic, but they transmit it in the system. They go, so you get that, and that's the way you get the J&J vaccine.
Right, but the long story or the short story here is that it doesn't matter what type of vaccine it is, right? That they're all effective, that they all work.
They're all very effective. Yes, they're all absolutely effective. And whichever one you have access to, you should just go with. Don't even think about, choosing one order. The reality is, yes, there is a reality that one is one shot and the other 2 are 2 shots, but they're all just the same and has the same benefits.
Right.
The other thing I was gonna say, Andrew, is that some of the concern that some people have is how fast it was created, the vaccine, and I think that it's important to remind people that the way these vaccines were created was something that has been they were studying from before.
Yes, good point. So if you remember Zika virus, that's how the vaccines for that was created, which was a couple of years ago. So this technology is not new at all. It's not a new technology. It's not as old as the other technologies. I think our first vaccine was probably 17 something, but this is not it was not made just for COVID. This technology has been there. And also the reality is, if you spend trillions of dollars, right, into this kind of technology, into getting something, and you take away emergency use authorization, right? You have, if you look at the amount of people that are involved in the trial, and these are volunteers mostly in Brazil, in Europe, in the United States. I mean, we're at 38 states. We're talking about 45,000 people going through, the different phases. So it went through all the 4 phases of the trial. It's just that the technology itself is different. So the technology or the vaccine manufacturer benefits from that technology and also benefits on the end by the emergency use authorization, because then that shortens the time that we can get it to the market. But the technology and getting the red tape out of the way actually makes it much shorter time to get it to market.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you.
I think the last thing that I know people are concerned about that we definitely want to address before we let you go for today is side effects, right? So people are hearing about side effects with certain shots, and some people are concerned about that. Can you describe the side effects? Should they be concerned? Is that a good thing, a bad thing? Like, what would you say about the side effects?
So remember, I went to the immune system. So the human body has a tendency to fight things itself, right? You see any foreign object, you fight it. I always say we have cells that I always call the Marines. If you have something foreign, the cells in the body are the Marines. They rush there and fight them. That fighting itself, or developing the immune system, develops some what we call the side effects. Okay, so you can have a fever, right? You can have, if it's an injection site, you can have pain and swelling and redness there. Okay, but those things are the effect to show that your immunity is working. Okay, so, and when you look at it, the first shot of the Moderna and the Pfizer BioNTech, the side effects are milder. Okay, those side effects, they're mild. I don't even think we should call them side effects, because when you call them side effects, it confuses people. Okay, these are immune responses. So they're milder, and for the second dose, they're much higher. They're much more severe for some people, not everybody. Okay, and I can tell you, when I went through the first shot myself, I got my I have the Pfizer BioNTech. I had soreness in my arm, I had body ache, and I had very mild fever, but not significant at all, right? So, and then the second one, the ache was worse. I can tell you that, but not in a way that I couldn't get up and not move around. But it was there. It's just body ache, and that's just the immune system fighting itself, okay, or developing more strength to fight the disease itself. So it should not concern, or I mean, it should worry somebody, but not concern enough to say, oh no, I'm not going to take it because of the side effect. That's the immune response.
Right. So then from what I'm hearing from you is that it's actually a positive thing to have your body respond, right? You might not necessarily, be happy that you're experiencing these things, but it's actually a good thing. Not to say that if you don't experience them, that's a bad thing, right? We don't want to, right? But that's what I'm hearing from you, right?
I was just going to mention, yes. So the response can be used as positive, but does not mean that if you don't have response, you don't have the body ache and stuff like that, does not mean that the vaccine is not working at all. Does not mean that. But if you have those kind of response, then that's fine. And the safety record, I mean, a lot of people are concerned about, is it safe? And we've had millions, we've had 100 million vaccinated in the United States. This is one of the most checked and made sure that there is no untoward effects. CDC has a Be Safe. They made a whole different site where you can have an app on your phone and you can tell them the side effects that you have. Even when you look at Europe, right? Europe has another vaccine that that did not have emergency use authorization here, the AstraZeneca vaccine, right? Just last week, it was stopped briefly because you had a few people develop blood clots. When they studied the result of the blood clot from the people, it was less than the normal population. So if there was no vaccine, right, the amount, say 50 million people or whatever the number that has had the vaccine, for that timeline, you'll have more people with blood clots than even with the vaccine. So that's why they said, okay, it's very safe. These amount of people here is less than the normal, I think it was 25 out of millions of people who have had that. And then they stopped it briefly, they looked at it and said, no, it's very safe. So they continued. So it is studied so well. This is developed countries. They're not going to risk the whole population of the country, not being sure that this is really safe to use, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I definitely appreciate you saying that. Not only that, but your own personal experience of getting the shot, because I think people need to hear. I can add a little bit as someone who actually had COVID in September. So let me share that. And it was 2.5 weeks of hell. I have no other way of describing that. And compared to what you're saying in terms of what you suffered for like a day, there's no comparison. So I based on what you said and based on my experience, I think that we can safely tell people that given a choice between suffering some side effects due to the shots or going through COVID and taking a chance that you're going to get a severe case of COVID, you're better off playing it safe and getting the side effects through the shot. Would you agree with me?
I'll agree with that. And to that, I'll also add, because I hear a lot of people, oh, COVID is not that bad, for the amount of people that have died from it and stuff like that. Put it in perspective. COVID, the death rate of COVID is 2%, about 2 to 3%, right? the death rate from flu is 0.1%. So COVID is 20 times, right, more dangerous in terms of killing people than flu. So comparing COVID and flu is really not even comparing apples and oranges. It's like comparing a book to a fruit, okay? So now, if you look at also the amount of people that get COVID, right, the transmission rate of COVID and flu, COVID is a lot. When you have 1 million people, right? If you have 1 million people and 2% die, that's significant. If you have 100 million people get COVID, I mean, we've had 500,000 deaths in the United States. So that's significant. So even that 2%, you might say, oh yeah, 2% is very small, but 2% out of 100 million is a lot. 2% out of 100 is 2. Yeah, 2 people, but 2% out of 100 million, it's significant amount. So yes, it is very significant. And we also see a lot of, especially young people who say, we don't get it. Yes, which is probably true. The transmission rate or the amount of young individuals, adults that get it is less. But also, they contribute to the transmission of the disease. Doesn't mean that they don't transmit it. And the more we transmit the disease, the more the country is going to be on lockdown. Yeah. There is no way when you have 500,000 people die or the transmission rate being high with you function. Why would kids go to school, right? So if everybody contributes, then more things will open up and things will be better. So that's the only thing, I would say. So people have to we have to come together, irrespective of our views, our, the history. I can go back to Tuskegee and say, there was bias, right, to Black people getting this. Yes, I can agree. I can go back and say I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. I can go back and say somebody told me it's a hoax. I can do all that, but until we come together, until we really work on this together, it's not going away. It is absolutely not going away because we need herd immunity. Without that, we're stuck with COVID, and unfortunately, a lot of people are just going to die. And the country is just going to be on a lockdown, which does not benefit everyone, does not benefit anyone.
And I think those are great words to end with. I know that you're coming back with us on part 5 to talk more about, just so when you're vaccinated, what to do next. But I appreciate, your time with us. I know Mariam, wants to say the parting words, so I'll drop it off to her, and we'll see you. Thank you for being today, and we'll see you in for part 5. Mariam?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Mariam.
I want to say thank you, Andrew, for your time today. I know sometimes you're very busy, so thank you for taking the time, for always saying yes to do this kind of initiatives in the community. And I also want to thank you and your team, because you guys were instrumental during the COVID response of the hospital in making sure that when we were sending people home to monitor the COVID, you made sure that especially those vulnerable communities, that they have the resources that they need to take care of themselves. So gracias, I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. It's always my pleasure, Mariam. Always, always pleasure working with you.
So this was part 1 of our vaccine week. Thank you to Andrew again for explaining what vaccines are and the COVID-19 vaccines. Again, he'll be back for part 5 to talk about, what to do after you're vaccinated, the do's and don'ts after vaccination. And tomorrow, prepare yourselves for part 2. And part 2 will cover how vaccines are approved and how the COVID vaccines were approved, right? Thank you again.